This conference will now be recorded.
I now call to order this regular meeting of the King George County Service Authority Board of Directors. First, we'll start off with an invocation by Ms. Kupka, the Pledge of Allegiance by Mr. Miller. Please stand as you're able.
Dear Lord, thank you for bringing us all here together this evening to work on the business of the Service Authority. Please watch over all who gather here and grant us all travel mercies as we make our way home. And please give us the wisdom and strength to make decisions in the best interests of both our customers and the community. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Mr. Miller, are there any amendments to the agenda this evening?
No, sir.
Moving on to public comment. Is there anybody here in the audience that would like to make a comment? Seeing no one. Mr. Dines, is there anybody online?
No, Mr. Chairman.
That'll close public comment. Reports from members of the board. Ms. Binder?
No report at this time. Thank you.
Ms. Cleveland?
Yes, good evening, everybody. So this week I had a chance to talk to a lot of the constituents in my district about the proposed wastewater and water contract. There's a lot of citizens that are very anxious about the contract because they do not want their bills to go up. And they're very upset that their water bills are so high. And I just wanted to make sure that the board understands and knows that a lot of the folks that I talked to are not happy with the way that the Service Authority has been run over the years, putting us in the situation that we're in right now. So these decisions that are being made really need to be thoughtful.
Ms. Kupka?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just say that on Wednesday, February 15th, I and my colleagues attended a special meeting of the Service Authority. Thank you. That's all.
Mr. Morris?
Nothing to report. Thank you.
And as for myself, we attended the meeting on February 15th for the work session concerning the Imboden contract. And that'll close the reports from members of the board. Moving on to the consent agenda.
I'd like to move to accept the consent agenda as written.
Second.
We have a motion made and seconded. Is there any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Chair votes aye, motion carries. Report from the county attorney, Ms. Lackey.
Good evening. I wanted to just to inform the board that we've been receiving a few requests for possible lease of space on water tower sites or in the general vicinity of water towers. I think I'm tracking up to about 3 interested parties as of right now. The good news is that could be a potential source of revenue, but I didn't know and wanted to raise for discussion, if necessary by the board, how you would like me to proceed with these proposed leases. Do you want me to go ahead and review the proposed lease instruments and report back to you on the proposed rent amounts? They're generally monthly amounts that are proposed. Is that something you'd like me to report back on in report form, or I just didn't know if there were any other recommendations on review of those leases and also of the potential revenue source? as to those leases.
Does anybody have a strong feeling one way or the other?
We have rented our towers in the past. I really don't have a problem with it. It is a revenue source.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I believe just during my term on the board, previously there was one with KGI, and then there was another one with Sprint. So it wouldn't be unusual for us to allow something like this. So I would ask for consensus of the board to direct the county attorney to review the legal instruments and prepare them to be brought forward to the board at a later date.
Everybody in agreement on that? Yeah.
Okay, great. I just would like you all to know that at least one of the sites is one of the sites where some of the equipment for the sheriff's office improvements are going to be. So I need to also verify that there's no conflict with that particular location, but I'm happy to review those leases and report back to you on those.
Mr. Chair, may I ask a follow-up question? Madam County Attorney, are there any sites that are located on property that we plan to decommission?
Not to my knowledge. One of the sites is actually owned by the county, so it would require an action by both the Board of Supervisors and this board. And then the other site, there's two interested parties, which based on my preliminary research, it's owned fully by the Service Authority. So that one's a little bit less complicated.
Thank you very much.
Is there anything else, Ms. Lackey?
Nothing further. Thank you.
All right. We have no presentations and reports tonight, so that moves us straight into the action items, which is the water wastewater operator contract, which I'll open that for discussions.
I can start, Mr. Chairman. I don't think that moving forward with the water and wastewater operator contract is in the best interest of our clients of the Service Authority, considering the amount that their rates will increase. I think there's other alternatives that need to be explored, and we need to take in consideration those rates that definitely will increase and will likely be at the minimum of what our financial advisor advised, because there's a lot of other variables that we're not considering at the moment.
So I just want to kind of chime in on a few things just so it's on the record. So I did some investigation trying to figure out, how high is high and whatnot. And looking at the numbers roughly, if you paid 30 years of average rates, obviously some people pay more than that, some people pay less, but average rates, you're somewhere in the $60,000 total in payment for Service Authority Water and Sewer. Looking at current rates, though, here in King George, having talked to several home builders about it, your wells here in King George are somewhere between 25 and 35,000 installed for the deep wells that you need right now, and your septic systems run between $15,000 and $25,000, depending on which system you have to have, and that doesn't include maintenance and whatnot. So all in roughly, the amount you're paying, monthly over 30 years equates similarly to the amount you'd be paying for a well and septic, except that it's upfront on your mortgage. The other thing that was kind of an interesting note, talking to different people about it, is the property value for water sewer is higher than property value for well and septic. So just because there's all the maintenance costs and whatnot that go into having to maintain those. So the same 1 acre lot for that would have well and septic put on it is not worth as much as the same 1 acre lot that has water and sewer on it. So there's value in the homes for it. So the long and short of it is, it appears that there's a benefit to having water and sewer. From a financial standpoint, makes your house more valuable in the long run. And then in the long run, what you pay for well and septic up front and over the term of that of the usage of the house equates to about what you're going to pay over the same 30-year period for the service authority, with the service authority obviously covering the maintenance and whatnot of everything. So, and that's including kind of the bump up that we're looking at. Obviously, there's probably bump ups in future years, and that number will vary some, but all in all, they're very comparable price wise over the life of the life of the property. So it's just payments are done differently. So I just wanted to let everybody know that I know everybody perceives the water and sewer is high. It is higher than surrounding counties. That's for sure. But in the grand scheme of things versus well and septic, which is the other option here, you're over a 30-year period, you're paying the same amount for the service authority that you would for well and septic, and you get the benefit that your property is worth a little bit more money. That's according to realtors. I'm not a realtor, so I'm just relaying information from some professionals. So that's just a couple things I wanted to note on this to let everybody think about.
So, Mr. Chairman, I can follow up on that. And I can appreciate that information that you just gave. But in reality, the way that the property values do work out is during the development phase and a developer going to get water and sewer on a property. I don't think that you can really give a true comparison, because the land for sewer, the lands that do not have water and sewer from a public source are generally a lot less expensive. And so the client is usually getting that property for a lot less expensive at first, because of that fact that the developers have to put more money into the land.
I would like to chime on that, Mr. Chair. I disagree with that. As someone who had to pay a lot for their well and septic to go in and has had to pay for a lot to have it repaired. But I'm going back to one thing that I've recently found out about our water and sewer bills that are always compared. They're one of the highest in Virginia. And from my understanding, and Mr. Parker maybe could help me out on this one, is that when they do those comparisons, they don't look at private companies, water companies. Those aren't compared in the comparison. And in Caroline County, one of the neighborhoods that's serviced by private has very high water bill rates. So I think we're playing with statistics a little bit in comparisons. So I just want to point this out. And then also too, is DEQ is also a factor in here. And DEQ, I don't think has the patience to wait around for us to get our act together. And they do have a good relationship with Imboden, and I've talked to quite a few people, not in your constituency, but they understand why this is a viable option. Thank you.
I think with some of the points that were brought up last week at the work session, and if I had these wrong, please correct me, but 60% of our operators are in the trainee classification, and we have 6 or 8 vacancies for operator. Not that high, but we do have a few. Yeah. Okay. We need these operators. We need the operators to be at the level that's required by the Commonwealth. We're not going to get there on our own. We've been trying to hire. We haven't been able to hire anybody. I think it's time to bring in fresh eyes, someone who is a wealth of experience, and help us get things to where we need to be. So hopefully in 3 years, when the contract is up, we can go back operating. But we can't continue like this. When we can't fill positions and we don't have people to train people to get them to the levels that we need to be to meet the requirement of the state. I understanding there's a possibility it's going to raise fees. I'm on a fixed income. I'm a retiree. I know about that, but there's a cost of doing business. Partially, we're in the situation we're in because of things that have been done in the past and all of these private systems that then got taken over by the county. This growth pains that we're experiencing is what our neighbors in Stafford and Spotsylvania experienced 10, 15, 20 years ago. Just like the development and the increase in construction and people looking this way, they all went through that a number of years ago. But I can remember reading in the Freelance Stars similar stories, and we need help. We need help, and I think we got to bite the bullet and get the experts in here and move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm certainly not in favor of anything generally that would definitely raise our customers' rates. We already know because everyone save Miss Bender, and no offense, Miss Bender, but you are the longest serving member of the Service Authority currently serving. So you were on the board in 2019 when the 5-year rate plan was adopted. The rest of us were not. We inherited it. We know there's more work to do. We know that we're going to have to revisit it in this current budget cycle coming up. So I'm not in favor of something that would increase the rates. Unfortunately, though, that's maybe the reality that we're facing. And otherwise, I would just point out that this solicitation was posted in EVA on September 28th of 2022. It closed on October 28th, 2022. And today is now February 21st, 2023. So we've had nearly 4 months to come up with some other plan. If someone had some other option, perhaps someone could have brought it forward. But right now, this is where we're at. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And I'll kind of close out by kind of echoing what Ms. Kopka said. I'm obviously a customer, full service customer. I live over in Hop Yard myself, and I don't want to pay more money than I have to, but there's kind of a reality of situations. We are not having luck managing the authority correctly. I don't know if it's ever been managed correctly. It's sort of been shoestringed. Even when we had better management in place, and we're kind of in a rock and a hard place with DEQ here. Sometimes, unfortunately, making decisions from a management perspective aren't always the funnest decisions to have to be made. Sometimes you have to make decisions that are in the best interests of moving things forward, and it may have a adverse cost impact. And that I think kind of where we are here is we need some kind of professional management to get things straightened out and hopefully knock down keep the fines off of us and DEQ off our back, because they're not particularly happy with us at this time.
Mr. Chair, I just want to follow up with that too. I mean, bringing in professional management is important and to get us on the right track. And maybe down the road we can revisit, our own taking back over. But right now we need to have that professional management. And I will say, as someone who is the longest serving person we did try many different things to try to save the Service Authority, and they didn't work. And some of it I really do think is how it was created and the amount of debt that was taken on at the beginning and the systems that right from the beginning had to be upgraded to bring them into compliance. So maybe if we go back, if we could have done it different, we had a time machine, but we don't. And we need to, in the end, look out for our customers and what's in their best interest in the future, and understanding that, yes, it is going to be a bite to their wallet, but hopefully with better management, in the end, they can save us money and put it on the right path. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, can I say something real quick? So there's a couple of things that keep on coming up routinely, and it's we need a fresh pair of eyes. We need a management company. I want to make sure that the board understands that this management company has been in place for the last year and a half and has been serving as a manager of our employees of the Service Authority since, what is it, January of 2022. And since then, we actually have had a DEQ violation at our Fairview Beach plant. So this is not a fresh set of eyes. They have been around, which is the reason why one of the considerations for having Emboden continue with their contract. I would recommend the board to consider having a consultant come in that has no interest in this project to advise, because we have been being advised by a party that is going to receive a significant amount of compensation.
Mr. Chair, just clarification for Mr. Miller. Under the Emboden contract, it was different than actually day-to-day management of the Service Authority, correct, Mr. Miller?
That's correct. At no time have they ever had the full authority of the Service Authority personnel. They've advised in different capacities. Obviously, as Ms. Cleveland referenced back in January of 2022, they became much more involved and were providing that advice in a I guess a more intensive role. And then once that emergency situation at Dahlgren had subsided, they backed off and were more consulting and advising our staff on the best way to operate the plants. But they were never ever in charge of King George County service personnel.
All right, thank you.
I have a question on that. Because after the incident happened at Dahlgren, we were informed as the board and decided as a board that Emboden was going to take over the management of the employees. So what you're saying now is that they did not do that?
They never had the legal liability of managing the employees. They were giving me advice. They were giving personnel advice. They were working in conjunction with like John Eisenbeis from the maintenance side of things, but they never had the true legal authority that they could, if an employee did something wrong or incorrectly, we have a progressive disciplinary process. They still had to follow that. So anybody that might have been terminated because of failure to perform, I was given advice or I was consulted with, and then I had to carry out that action. And that happened in a couple of incidents. But it was never a situation where they could, have that free authority to do that. No.
So they were not being disciplined because they didn't work for them, but they were being managed by them.
In the sense of yes, they were being advised as to how the best operation of each plant would go, specifically at Dahlgren and then later at Perkins Corner, but they never had the final say over our employees.
And I'll give you an example kind of that'll sum up how it worked. So at one of the plants, the Emboden people would tell the operators how to set the gauges, dials, and everything, all the chemicals and whatnot, and they would have it set to meet standards and whatnot, and they'd leave for the weekend, and they get back on Monday morning, and somebody had changed everything back to the wrong way because they felt we had a certain employee at the time that felt that they knew better. So while Emboden was advising what to do appropriately, there was certain employees that were doing things as they so felt, and Emboden couldn't do anything but tell Mr. Miller and start a process to try to get those employees moved or let go. So that's kind of where the there's nothing when they got back Monday morning. There's nothing you could do other than set everything back to where it should have been, and say, hey, you got a problem with your employees. So that's kind of where the issue on the management. There's no hard ability to do anything other than than give people advice, and if they didn't follow it, you know.
I guess the point I'm trying to make is, so employees were making the wrong choices, and then they weren't being able to be disciplined by Emboden because they couldn't legally do that. But the county didn't discipline them then?
They did eventually. It's not the same as a private sector where, like if I have an employee screw up real bad, they're shown the door that day. Here you have progressive disciplinary action. So it may take a very, very long time to get somebody to the point where you can terminate them. There's no, hey, you really screwed up. Goodbye. That's just not how it works. And Mr. Miller can correct me if I'm wrong, but that's my understanding.
Well, I mean,
of it.
certainly, there is a progressive disciplinary process. There's a process that starts with counseling. There's a process that starts, then you move to other steps. Ultimately, termination can occur. And there were instances where several employees were actually terminated or reassigned. Those were my actions, and they were based on some input from Emboden, but some input from observations and discussions with other employees about performance. I think Mr. Parker, his synopsis is exactly correct. There were situations where Emboden was brought in specifically to provide advice and consultation on the proper way to operate certain plants, and we had an employee or two that just refused to follow those directions, and that was then told to me, and then eventually through the process, those employees were separated from the county. And I think it's very important to note, I do believe that when we had this, when the board arrived at the decision and the discussion of this, I know that the benefit that Ms. Bender and Mr. Parker took the benefit of the tour and had opportunities to talk with Emboden personnel about the proper way to run a wastewater plant, or at least specific ones. And I think I always got the feeling that was very useful to those board members. And we certainly made that available to everybody. And I know that that decision that you made to pursue this avenue of a contract was based on kind of that timing, and they were more heavily involved up until about April, and then they had employees that were essentially not following their direction still. And that's when we felt the best interest for us to do was to either allow them to be the manager, which would have involved a procurement process, which is what we ultimately followed, or I got to start finding other employees. And I think that we realized the difficulty of finding other employees, and just shuffling bodies in and out wasn't helpful. We needed that professional management. We still were running the ad for the wastewater manager position, because we knew that if we could get somebody that had that expertise, then we would certainly get them in there. And then we had to elevate employees by kind of attrition, if you will, to be the lead. And you have a good lead right now in Michael Whitman, who's doing a great job for us. But it's one of these situations where he even needs that much more involvement in the management of things to make this a truly, I think, a very well-run operation. And I would agree with everything that has been said, Ms. Bender and Ms. Kupka, Mr. Morris, and I feel for, we've got a lot of hidden costs that are coming through our constant relationship that we have with DEQ. And it's not a good relationship, obviously, it never is, but, we know that, I mean, that's a tough situation there. And I think that what DEQ is looking at is, hey, King George, what are you going to do about it? You've been telling us for years, going way back, you're going to fix this, you're going to do this. And it's kind of like little spurts, little starts. And then ultimately it kind of falls apart because of money or because of just willpower or whatever sheer desire not to do anything. But this is going to send, I think, a message to the people in the community that you're taking your water and your wastewater operations seriously. And it's going to send a message to the folks at DEQ that you take it seriously, as well as the folks at VDH. So those are those regulatory folks that are factors in this decision too, or they should be.
Are there any other comments or?
Mr. Chair, I only want to make one thing. After the vote goes down on the contract, I just want to reiterate our wanting to look at what's left of the service authority restructuring, even looking at the board. Do we need to meet every 2 weeks or just once a month, because the whole dynamic will change. So I just wanted to make sure we keep that in mind.
And Chairman, is there a need for a general manager if we have a contract? Would we still need to have the interim general manager?
You would have to have somebody, but I don't know if you have to. That's part of what Ms. Bender's getting at. If we do award the contract to Imboden, you'd have to look at the structure. And it could be done different ways. It could be our young engineer Bryce interacts with since he's looking at the conveyance portions anyway. Maybe he interacts with Imboden to just check up on things, see where things are going. It could be done several different ways. You're going to have to ultimately have somebody in charge at the county talking with Imboden to make sure things are going the right direction and, coordinating things, but it could be done a number of different ways, I guess is the best way to put it. And I think that's why Ms. Bender's getting at, that we should really, maybe as a second motion at some point, if we do adopt this contract, we put together a committee or whatnot, however you look at it, to look at reorganization of the remaining employees, and also how control will be governed, how often this board meets, who at the county level is kind of the day-to-day representative interacting with Imboden and helping feedback decisions and whatnot. So,
yeah, it's my understanding that you wanted to get this taken care of one way or the other, and then we were going to come back and you had a work session back in January, and we talked about creating a committee and then having this discussion. I wouldn't relieve yourselves of a role or cut down on your meetings, because I think there's plenty of things that can be done. I know that's one of the things that in conversations that I've had with Imboden, they're saying, look, we can get regular updates on what's going on in the wastewater, because that's a blind spot, other than what I can tell you or what Mr. Eisenbeis will inform you of, or some of the things that are going on with DEQ and things like that. But I think you're going to get from them an operational update, just like we do with Mr. Eisenbeis. And so I don't know that you want to relieve yourselves of a job yet. I think that there's plenty of things that first of all, we know, as Mr. Morris pointed out, you have to be careful about what happens with the grant money. We don't want to certainly impact that, because it is a tremendous shot in the arm to have $21 million, $5 million for water, $16 million for wastewater, that this county will receive. That's a shot in the arm. We don't want to certainly mess with that. I think the other thing is that there is a tremendous amount of opportunity for you as board members to be your ambassadors to the community on things like water and wastewater. I know Ms. Bender was talking about wanting to see if we could get somebody from DEQ here or VDH. Those kind of things are very important and still have a very great role. And so ultimately, I think a good solid direction that I could recommend would be that you establish some committee and we work on this. We obviously have a transition period. If this item gets approved tonight, we have a transition period that will be in place. And that's going to take some time to get everything worked out. Mr. Messler and myself and Ms. Hahn are prepared to work with everybody on that. And so, again, it's not an immediate change. It's going to be a transition, and I think that a committee on figuring out which way you want to go is the best route.
And when I was thinking about the board, just like maybe once a month meetings with a good report, because I noticed that was in the contractor report. And I know we always complained about Jonathan's long PowerPoints with all his nitrate, but they were helpful because you got to see if we were complying with our permits on the wastewater side. So we called them boring, but maybe they were probably needed.
Is there anything else? Any other comments? Okay, I guess we're closing comments and I'll be looking for a motion.
Mr. Chair, may I ask a question of the county attorney? Would this be to adopt the non-professional services agreement that we were previously presented with?
Yes, that's the recommendation. Bowdoin has said they could start as early as March 10th.
So with that, I'll move adoption of non-professional services agreement number 1022022-1400 regarding the operation and management of the King George County Service Authority wastewater treatment plants and waterworks facilities between King George County Service Authority and Bowdoin Environmental Services Incorporated.
Second.
We have a motion made and properly seconded. Is there any further discussion? So we'll do a roll call vote. Ms. Binder?
Aye.
Ms. Cleveland?
Nay.
Ms. Kupka?
Aye.
Mr. Morris?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Motion carries.
Mr. Chair, I would like to make a motion to organize a committee to look at the restructuring of what's left of the service authority and the board and what kind of reporting we need in the future.
We have a motion made and properly seconded. Is there any discussion? There's no discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Chair votes aye. Motion carries. We'll set up a committee to reorganize, to look at the reorganization for the remaining employees on the service authority and how it'll be overseen. Moving on. So I'll ask Mr. Miller kind of to help set up that committee. We'll get some volunteers from the board to take a look at that. I would definitely welcome one of the supervisors on that because I think there's going to be some interaction with the county on the county side. So I'll be glad to sit on that committee. But I'd welcome Ms. Binder or Ms. Kupka.
I don't know, Ms. Kupka. I was only going to throw my name in because I'm still here for 2 years. No offense. Thank you.
All right. So we'll see. We'll get that set up. That moves on to, there's no discussion item. So there's general manager's report.
Okay, so to-do list updates, we provided that at the last board meeting with the general manager's report. I don't have anything new. I know I held off the board of supervisors updates because it was the lateness of the hour, but just as a recap, A couple things. One is what you have in front of you is if it's in red, that's an update. And then at the very end of the document, there's something in shaded brown, and that means that it's done. Our waterworks plan was submitted to VDH back in August, and is in place, and that's one of the requirements that they had for us to get the grants, or to get one of the grants that we're working with them on. I will tell you this, that our new executive assistant, Jackie Fish, has already got some ideas on way we could maybe make this a little more interesting and more user-friendly, if you will. So we're going to do that at the next meeting. But I think that the important thing about the to-dos is most of them are, a lot of them are they're capital items. There's a ton of things that are going on. I think we provided that update last week or last board meeting as well, where we provided the list of the capital items that procurement is handling. Pretty extensive. The big ticket item obviously is the decommissioning of Perkins. But we also have the upgrades to a number of our well system, the interconnections to our well system. So we are very active on things right now, and we are obviously tracking a number of things. If there's any questions on the to-do list, let me know. Otherwise, we'll provide you with an update again at the next meeting. Proposed residential development on the horizon. So we have received a kind of a restart, if you will, for the Walnut Hill subdivision, and that is the one on Owens. So staff with the Community Development and Service Authority and Fire and Rescue will be meeting, going through that proposed development. That's a complicated one because there were certain forms of infrastructure that were done by the original developers. They are not, they haven't been signed off on necessarily by the county. I think there's a big plan on the horizon for that development where they're kind of restructuring things, maybe a little bit more density. So Service Authority will be involved in that because they had a prior agreement with the Service Authority. And so we'll be working through that. There's also a proposed development off of Deer Lane, which is in kind of by O'Reilly's and just by Hoover and that area in there. Mr. West is proposing a development in there. And that would be on the Arnold's Corner well system. And so we are going to be working with them on that. We're actually having discussions with their engineer on the water usage. And so that will track through, it's my understanding that's going to be a rezoning. And so that will track through Community Development, Planning Commission, and ultimately to the Board of Supervisors. But there would be a relationship with the Service Authority on the water side and the sewer side. Another one that is also out there that some people may be aware of is is a development that's off of Indiantown, kind of where Indiantown and Route 3 come together. I think this was a development that was in the works several years ago, I believe, and then now it's kind of resurfacing. That's another one that would be on Service Authority, water and sewer. And so we have been working with that developer in terms of giving information. A lot of these are things that are kind of in the hands of the developer. And you know, their timing is not something that's urgent or immediate, but they are inquiring, and so we would be in a position to work with them. So the next item on there is the employee anniversaries. Mr. Dines, do you have that on the next page? We have Jason Orr, 1 year with wastewater treatment operator trainee. So that's all I have. If there's any questions.
All right, seeing no questions, I'm looking for a motion.
Make a motion to adjourn to March 7th, 2023 at 5:30 in the boardroom.
We have a motion made and properly seconded. Or is there any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. We are adjourned to March 7th, 2023 at 5:30 PM here in the boardroom.